Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring the Civil Rights Movement, a period in American history that I think we can all agree continues to shape our world today. We've got this fascinating research document that really digs into the movement's impact, and I can't wait to unpack it with you. Imagine a world where you're denied service at a restaurant or forced to attend a different school simply because of your skin color.
It's hard to overstate how deeply ingrained segregation was into the fabric of American life.
Right. And this research document highlights that the civil rights movement spanning from the mid-1950s to the late 1960s wasn't just about changing laws. It was about changing hearts and minds.
Exactly. It was a deliberate, organized effort to dismantle both de jure segregation, the kind enforced by law, and de facto segregation, which existed in practice even without legal backing.
So two sides of the same coin, both deeply ingrained and harmful. And the movement aimed to eliminate the discrimination that stemmed from this segregation, the unfair treatment that permeated every aspect of life for African Americans.
It was about achieving basic human rights and dignity, things that were denied based solely on the color of one's skin.
Now, when we talk about the civil rights movement, certain names immediately come to mind. We can't discuss this era without acknowledging figures like Martin Luther King Jr., a champion of peaceful protest whose words resonated with millions.
King's belief in nonviolent resistance, coupled with his incredible speeches and leadership in marches, really galvanized the movement.
One thing that struck me in the research was how King's approach was seen as radical by some at the time. The idea of achieving equality through peaceful means in the face of such intense opposition was truly revolutionary.
It's a testament to the power of his vision and the courage of those who embraced it.
And then there's Rosa Parks, whose seemingly simple act of refusing to give up her seat on a bus sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. Did you know that Parks was actually a seasoned activist? She had been involved with the NAACP for years before that pivotal moment on the bus.
That context really adds another layer to her story. It wasn't a spontaneous act, it was a deliberate decision informed by years of fighting for justice.
It really makes you think about the power of individual action, even when it seems small in the moment.
Right, and the Montgomery bus boycott itself is a perfect example of how collective action can create real change. By refusing to ride the buses, African Americans in Montgomery hit segregationist policies right where it hurt their wallets.
It's amazing how that boycott lasted for over a year, demonstrating their unwavering commitment to justice. The research mentions that this boycott not only led to desegregation of the buses in Montgomery, but also inspired similar movements across the nation.
It really became a blueprint for peaceful protest.
Now we can't talk about legal victories without mentioning Thurgood Marshall, the brilliant lawyer who fought tirelessly against school segregation.
Marshall's legal mind was sharp, and his dedication to justice was unwavering. His work culminating in the landmark Brown v. Board of Education case was instrumental in dismantling the legal framework of segregation.
And to think he later became the first African-American Supreme Court justice. What a powerful symbol of progress. Speaking of Brown v. Board of Education, this 1954 ruling declared those separate but equal schools unconstitutional.
It was a monumental victory, but the research emphasizes that it didn't happen overnight. The NAACP, under Marshall's leadership, spent years meticulously building legal arguments and challenging discriminatory policies in court.
So it was a long and strategic fight that led to that pivotal moment. I imagine it must have been incredibly challenging to chip away at a system so deeply ingrained.
Absolutely. The resistance was fierce and the backlash was intense.
And just a few years later, in 1957, we see the Little Rock Nine bravely integrating Central High School in Arkansas.
Those 9 students facing down angry mobs and even the National Guard showed incredible courage. I was struck by a detail in the research. One of the Little Rock Nine, Minnie Jean Brown, was later expelled for retaliating against racist taunts. It highlights the psychological toll this fight took on these young people.
That's heartbreaking. They were fighting for equality, but they were still kids.
It's a reminder that behind these historical events are real people with real emotions.
Then in 1961 came the Freedom Rides, where activists, both black and white, rode buses throughout the South challenging segregation in interstate travel.
They faced violence and arrests, firebombs, and beatings. It was a dangerous undertaking, but they were determined to expose the injustices of segregation for the world to see.
The research actually mentions a specific incident during a Freedom Ride where a bus was firebombed in Anniston, Alabama. The riders were trapped inside the burning bus until a mob forced them out only to be brutally attacked.
It's a chilling reminder of the dangers these activists faced.
Absolutely. And it really underscores how deeply entrenched segregation was and the lengths to which people would go to uphold it.
These freedom rides were a turning point. They forced the federal government to take a more active role in enforcing desegregation laws. The images of violence against peaceful rioters shocked the nation's conscience and galvanized support for the movement.
It's incredible how these acts of defiance, fueled by courage and conviction, really pushed the movement forward.
Right. And then in 1963, the Birmingham campaign, led by Martin Luther King Jr., took the fight to one of the most segregated cities in America.
The research describes Birmingham as a stronghold of segregation. It was a dangerous place to challenge the status quo.
And the response from the authorities was brutal. Police used fire hoses and attacked dogs on peaceful protesters, many of whom were children.
Those images broadcast on national television were horrifying. I can't imagine what it must have been like to witness that kind of violence being inflicted on innocent people, especially children.
Those images were a wake-up call for many Americans. They couldn't ignore the reality of segregation and the brutality used to uphold it.
It really shifted public opinion and put pressure on the government to act.
Absolutely. And that same year, we have the March on Washington, a monumental demonstration for jobs and freedom.
The research mentions that hundreds of thousands of people converged on the nation's capital demanding equal rights and an end to discrimination. It must have been an incredible sight to behold.
It was a powerful display of unity and a testament to the growing momentum of the movement. And of course, it's where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech.
That speech is still so relevant today. His words about a nation where his children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, continue to resonate with people around the world.
It's a testament to the enduring power of his vision for a just and equitable society.
This sustained activism, the boycotts, the marches, the legal battles, all of it culminated in some landmark legislation. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, finally outlawing discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin in public accommodations.
This was a huge victory. It dismantled the legal basis for segregation and paved the way for equal access to education, employment, and public spaces.
Those whites-only signs finally started coming down.
It was a major step toward realizing the promise of equality for all Americans.
But the fight didn't stop there. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was another crucial victory, ensuring African Americans' right to vote.
This act eliminated discriminatory practices like literacy tests and poll taxes that had been used to disenfranchise black voters for generations. The research highlights the fact that these tests were deliberately designed to be confusing and difficult, often featuring questions that even highly educated people would struggle to answer.
It's infuriating to think about how people were denied their basic right to vote based on these unfair and manipulative tactics.
It was a blatant attempt to suppress black political power.
And in 1968, the Fair Housing Act was passed, addressing discrimination in housing.
This was a critical step in ensuring equal access to housing opportunities, regardless of race. The research points out that before this act, African Americans were routinely denied housing in certain neighborhoods, even if they could afford it.
So these landmark pieces of legislation really reshaped the legal landscape, creating a more just and equitable society. But the impact of the civil rights movement went far beyond legal victories, didn't it?
Absolutely. It sparked a profound cultural shift, challenging deep-seated prejudices and forcing a national conversation about race and equality.
It wasn't just about changing laws, it was about changing hearts and minds.
Exactly. The movement forced Americans to confront the ugly reality of racism and discrimination, and it inspired other marginalized groups to fight for their own rights.
The research points out how the tactics and strategies of the civil rights movement served as a blueprint for other social justice movements.
The women's rights movement, the LGBTQ+ rights movement,
Absurd.
the disability rights movement, all drew inspiration and lessons from the struggles and triumphs of the civil rights movement.
It's inspiring to see how this one movement had such a ripple effect, empowering others to demand change and fight for equality. And we can't forget the role of music during this era. Those gospel songs, freedom songs, and protest anthems became the soundtrack of the movement.
The research highlights how music played a crucial role in unifying people, boosting morale, and spreading the message of the movement.
I love that it mentions "We Shall Overcome" as a powerful anthem of hope and resilience that transcended racial and geographical boundaries.
Those songs weren't just entertainment, they were expressions of struggle, solidarity, and unwavering belief in a better future.
So we see how the civil rights movement wasn't just a moment in time, it was a catalyst for lasting change, both legally and culturally.
It reshaped the fabric of American society and continues to inspire generations to fight for justice and equality.
But as our research document makes clear, the fight for equality isn't over. While the movement achieved remarkable progress, there's still work to be done.
It's crucial to remember that the fight for equality, it's an ongoing journey, not a destination.
Mm.
We still see echoes of those past injustices in the challenges that persist today.
The research document doesn't shy away from that. It points out that despite the progress made in education, disparities still exist in access to quality schooling and resources.
And while legal barriers to voting have been dismantled, efforts to suppress voting rights, often disproportionately impacting minority communities, continue. It's a stark reminder that the fight for equal access to the ballot box is far from over.
Right. And we can't overlook the economic disparities that persist, with income inequality and wealth gaps often falling along racial lines. The fight for economic justice is deeply intertwined with the fight for racial justice.
The research highlights the fact that the median wealth of Black families is significantly lower than that of white families. This wealth gap has persisted for generations, making it harder for Black families to build economic security and opportunity.
It's a reminder that true equality requires addressing not just legal barriers, but also the systemic economic disadvantages that have created this uneven playing field.
And we can't ignore the ongoing struggle against police brutality and racial profiling issues that tragically mirror the injustices of the past.
It's heartbreaking to see these issues persist. It's like we're still grappling with the same problems that fueled the civil rights movement decades ago.
The research discusses the importance of police reform and accountability, as well as the need for broader societal changes to address systemic racism within law enforcement and the criminal justice system.
It's a reminder that achieving lasting change requires a multifaceted approach. We need to address the root causes of these issues, not just the symptoms.
It's a complex challenge, but the civil rights movement provides a roadmap for how we can continue pushing for progress. It shows us the power of collective action, the importance of speaking truth to power, and the unwavering belief in the possibility of a more just and equitable world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the civil rights movement, I keep coming back to the idea that progress isn't a straight line. There will be setbacks and challenges, but the fight for equality must continue.
The legacy of the movement calls upon each of us to be active participants in the ongoing struggle for justice. Whether through advocacy, community organizing, education, or simply engaging in meaningful conversations, we all have a role to play in shaping a better future.
And it's not just about grand gestures, it's about the everyday actions we take to challenge injustice and create a more inclusive world.
It's about speaking up against discrimination when we see it, supporting organizations working for social justice, and educating ourselves and others about the history and ongoing impact of inequality.
I think the key takeaway for me is that the fight for equality is a marathon, not a sprint. It requires sustained effort, commitment, and a belief that change is possible.
And it's a fight we must undertake together. The civil rights movement teaches us that solidarity and collective action are essential for dismantling oppressive systems and creating a more just world.
The research document we explored today offers a wealth of information and resources for anyone who wants to delve deeper into this pivotal chapter of American history.
I encourage everyone to explore the suggested books, websites, and documentaries. Learning about the past is crucial for understanding the present and shaping the future.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. The civil rights movement may have reshaped America, but it's up to each of us to continue the work of building a truly just and equitable society for all.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the civil rights movement. We hope it's inspired you to reflect, learn, and take action.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving for a more just world.